Welcome back to Old Times Talk. My name is Landon, and today we have a wonderful guest.
Oh, wow, I don't know about that.
Well, thank you, Eileen, for being on the podcast.
You're welcome.
So to start off, just introduce us to who you are, where you grew up.
Well, my name is Eileen Turner, but my maiden name was Stenquist. That's one that kind of sticks with you. I grew up in Tremont, Utah, in a family with 7 children, mom and dad on the farm. And so guess what we kids did? We worked on the farm. My dad always said that he had so many children so that he could, it was slave labor for him. But interestingly enough, I didn't pay for my college education. He did, because he said, that's the only way that I can pay you back for what you did on the farm. What a neat guy. But he only had an 8th grade education. So I think that I know that he valued education very, very much. But anyway, grew up on the farm. I had eye surgery when I was 3. I was cross-eyed. My parents, bless their hearts, saw it and said that we need to get something done with this. And so they did, and it was a success. But then I wore glasses from then until I was in the 4th grade. And then my eyes, changed around, and so I didn't have to wear glasses for a long time. Funny thing, okay, this is a kid thing. You don't even, you don't think about what's going to happen to you. I was out playing in the driveway, and it was gravel, and I picked up a rock and threw it up in the air and stood there and watched it come down. Bam, right on my glasses, and broke my glasses. And I thought, an adult would move out of the way, but a child doesn't have that much smart. So didn't move out of the way. Anyway, grew up and went to Bear River High School, graduated, went over to Utah State, and got my college degree in elementary education. That's where I met my husband in an archery class. Now, isn't that exciting? Cupid really did something. But we met in an archery class, and I got the A and he got the B. And he said that was because it was a woman professor, and I said, no, that was because I was a better shot than you. So it's been a going thing with our family. I also took a rifle class in college. Because when I went to college, you had to have so many PE credits. I mean, it was kind of like high school. But so I took some strange ones. Anyway, graduated, came down here to Kaysville and did my student teaching at Burton Elementary, and then I got a job there. So I taught my first year at Burton Elementary, taught 2nd grade, had a very interesting experience there. The principal and I got to be really good friends, and that was really neat. I really appreciated that. Got married after that and went back to, we went to Vernal because that's where we lived. The first year we were married was in Vernal, the end of the earth for Utah. Anyway, went there, and then we came back, and I taught in Logan for a year because my husband still had a year of school left. So I taught kindergarten in Logan. Then he got a job in Walla Walla, Washington, and we moved there. And he worked for the Army Corps of Engineers. He was not, he was not in the Army, but that's where we moved. And I taught kindergarten there. Very interesting experience there. The school I taught at was next to the state penitentiary. Now, the state penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington, is a high. You've got all of your bad people there, like the Los Angeles Strangler was there. All of these things. Yeah, so very interesting, but. So interesting experience with teaching because my children were obviously, lived a lot of them around the penitentiary, lower income, and heartbreaking things that happened there. I had one little girl who had held my hand all the time at recess, and they never told anything. And so finally I found out, I said, why does she always hold my hand? She says, oh, you don't know. Her mother was just convicted of murder for killing their 2-year-old. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I know why she's there, and just heartbreaking to think that this would happen. And then I had another little boy who, got close to, but he was a little stinker. And so he was in trouble a lot. Anyway, his dad was very, very upset with me. And there was once I looked outside the window and I saw him sitting out there in his car. So I went to the principal and I said, so-and-so sitting out there in the car. And he says, we're going to keep an eye on him. He had a gun. He was going to kill me. And you talk about scared, it just unbelievable, but he got arrested, so that was taken care of. Just very interesting experience. But then my husband went in the Air Force, and so then we got stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. So we went down there, but I didn't have to teach after that because I told him as soon as he got a job, I was staying at home. And so that's what we did. I had 2 babies while in the Air Force, had 2 sons, and then we moved back to Walla Walla, which was very interesting because my husband was rehired when the government was not hiring. There was a government freeze on for hiring, and he got a job, so he must have been pretty darn good. But we lived there for 30 years, and just friendships, just unbelievable. And our boys went to school there, graduated from, it was called Wah High. It was easier to say that instead of Walla Walla High School, so it was Wah High. My oldest son, 7 feet tall, he played basketball, came down to Utah State on a basketball scholarship, but because of a heart condition that he has, he was unable to play, but that was okay. He found out that there's life after basketball. He says there's more to life than running up and down the floor in a pair of shorts. So that's what he does. Anyway, but then we, like I said, we lived there for 30 years, had wonderful experiences, so many friends. It's just unbelievable because they come and go. And then after he retired when he was 56, because he'd worked for the government for so long, and you can do that after you've worked for them for 30 years. And so he said, that's it, I'm hanging it up. I'm not one of these that's going to keep going to work every day just to come to work. Because he said there's no advancement, so why in the world would I do that? And I thought, wonderful. So then we decided that, well, we had decided long before this that when he retired and as a married couple, we were going to go on a mission for the church. And so that's what we did, and the stake president didn't let him forget it because my husband was one of his counselors, and he says, you know, Turner, he always called him Turner instead of Lee. And he said, you said you were going to go on a mission. This is when you're going to be in the mission field. So he retired on 1 January 2000. And we were in the MTC in May. And we got a call to England, and it was a proselyting mission, and that scares couples just spitless, but we did never go tracting. We worked with 2 wards, and again, experiences unbelievable, just so good. People, when they found out we were going to England, said, oh, you're going to be so unhappy. And I said, why? They said, because, they're so stuck up in London. And I said, we're not going to London. We went up to the northern, as far as you could go and still be in the country instead of in Scotland. And so we were in the villages most of the time, and in the little villages, they're just as friendly as anyone you'd ever want to meet. And they're just wonderful. As a matter of fact, we went to one of our favorite villages just before we came back here to Utah. And, and that was when we had moved to Utah. I said I'd never live in Utah again, but where we are. But anyway, we went because they had the best dessert I've ever had in my life. It was called sticky toffee pudding. Oh, and I'm a chocolate fan. So for me, but theirs was the best, other places. But we went there to say goodbye to them. It was a husband and wife that owned it. It was just a little tea room, probably about 6 tables. And she was the waitress, he was the chef. And so we told them that we were leaving and going back to the States. And they both just, you can't go, you're our friends, you can't go. And I thought, oh my gosh, what did we do? We just were friendly with them. Hello, we did volunteer in a hospital while we were there. If you ever want to think that socialized medicine is the way to go live in a country where they have it. And you're not ever going to do it again. Because we saw things there that we thought didn't even exist in hospitals anymore. A ward with both men and women in it, in the ward. Probably about 40 people in the ward, with a curtain just between you and the next person. 1 restroom for that whole thing. And so my husband had to have surgery while he was there. And he says, Eileen, if you put me in this hospital, I will curse you for the rest of your life, because you could go private, because they had private hospitals. So that's what we did. Difference between night and day. I mean, the private hospital was just like being in a country club. I mean, just unbelievable. It was wonderful. That good experience. Of course, the biggest challenge was having 4 elders live with us. Yeah. Any of you that have ever had 4 19-year-old sons, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was an experience. They found out that Elder and Sister Turner don't put up with a lot of junk. You do things, And then we were the housing inspectors for the month and had to go out to our zone and check all the housing. And they found out again, Sister Turner doesn't put up with anything. So on their P day, which was the Monday before, they cleaned like little troopers because their places were all really neat and clean, which they should have been. I mean, good grief, you're renting from somebody, you don't wreck it. So anyway, that was a mission in England. Then we came home, and people said when we got back, what are you going to do? Oh, well, we're just going to rest for a couple of years. I mean, I was reading in the Book of Mormon and came to the chapter in Alma where he's going home. And it says that he went home and he rested. And I thought, that's going to be us. I'm going to go home and I'm going to rest. And so we did that. So we went home and for 2 years, and then we said, we want to do it again. So we decided that we would sell the house, which we'd lived in for 30 plus years, loved it dearly, loved the people in Walla Walla. We lived on a dead-end street, and that's how you get to know people, is when you live on a dead-end street. But we wanted to go again, and we thought, why are we making this trip down to Utah all the time? Our sons lived here, and so it was between 8 and 10 hours that it took us to drive down here. We said, what? So we'll put the house on the market and see how long it takes to sell, and that will be when we put the papers in. Let's put it this way, the next day it sold. So we're listening, we're going, we're going to go. So we went to, okay, that call was an interesting one. We got the white envelope, opened it up, and have you ever seen cartoons where the hero, because of what happens, has a heart in his throat? I said, that's right where my heart was, because I opened it and it said, Istanbul, Turkey. You've got to be kidding me. Turkey. I had to get out the atlas and find out where it was because I'd forgotten where it was. And looked at that and I thought, oh my gosh, we would have been teaching English in a military school for the officers there. Well, we didn't go there because back then the relationship between the United States and Iran was really bad, and they border. So we didn't go there. So then we were waiting again. So we get the second white envelope. And this one I gulped the heart down because it was Minsk, Belarus. Belarus, which is still the most communist of the breakaway countries in Russia. I said, Leland, what are we going to do? So there we would have been welfare missionaries. No badge, lived in a gated community. You just went out and found out what you could do, what the church could do to spend their money on for people to help them. Well, my husband had to have a blood check every month, and they came back and said, you can't go there because everything is third world as far as the medical is concerned. So we were back in waiting again. In the meantime, the house has sold, and we really don't have any place to live. Luckily, the people that bought it were neighbors of ours, and they said you can stay as long as you want, so it was no problem. Well, then we get the third envelope. I had a dream the night before that third envelope came, that our mission call came and we were going to go to New Zealand. You know, just dreams. You don't think they're that great. Got the white envelope, opened it up. He says, Leland, you won't believe this. He says, what? I said, Auckland, New Zealand. I said, hallelujah, we got a good one. So then we put all of our stuff down here in Kaysville in storage because we didn't know where we wanted to live when we got finished. We had no home down here. We just knew that we wanted to get back into Utah and be close to our family. So we went and we worked in an employment office there. For the church owned an employment office. It was just new. I was the secretary. I'd never even turned on a computer. And I thought, and you're asking me to be a secretary? Okay. My husband was an employment consultant, and he was good at that because he was used to interviewing people. I mean, with the church experience and the experience he'd had in the Corps and everything. So he was out that, but again, super. We spoke every Sunday except Fast Sunday in a ward someplace in the mission. And we all spoke on the same thing. It was the same talk, so there was no big deal there. But I spoke on education, and my husband's talked on self-reliance. Because one of the biggest problems in New Zealand is that so many of the men have been on the dole for so long that it's a generational thing with them. And so they have no desire to go out and get a job that pays. Well, the church wants to get them off of this immediately. And so that was why the employment office, he would go out and interview people the employers, and say, you know, we're new in the area, we'd like to give you this opportunity to work with us. And then they'd say, well, how much is it going to cost us? And they said, nothing. They said, what? Nothing. That's right, nothing. So they were very interested in that. Well, so then we get on the plane, a 13-hour flight. Oh, I don't want anybody to ever have to do that. It's horrible. And then sitting in Los Angeles and waiting for a connector flight is horrible too. But anyway, came back to Utah. We left on the 11th of November, which in England is Armistice Day. Now here it's Veterans Day. But their Armistice Day means a lot to them because they lived through what went through in the World War I. And it was signed on the 11th of November, which was the 11th month, 11th day, and it was the 11th hour that the armistice was signed. And so we knew that it was a very special time for them. And so we asked our taxi driver who was taking us to the airport, to Heathrow, which is one of the biggest airports that there is, said, what are you going to do at 11 o'clock, Terry? And he says, I will pull over to the side of the road and I will have that moment of silence that they actually have. And we thought, well, that's great. So we're in Heathrow, huge airport, busy, busy, busy as can be. A chime comes on. It's 11 o'clock, and we ask everybody for a moment of silence. That airport went silent, just went absolutely silent. I still get goosebumps thinking about it because that means so much. So anyway, we left the 11th of November, which is summer down in New Zealand. So I have on a turtleneck sweater, a long sleeve and everything, and people go by and, what in the world is going on here? Well, we get back in Utah. Of course, there's an 18-hour time difference, so it didn't take us a whole lot longer to get here, except it did. But it was freezing cold outside. Thought I was going to die of the cold. But so then we just kind of said, where are we going to live? And my husband said, you want to live in Tremonton again? I said, you've got to be kidding, never. And I said, well, do you want to live in Morgan? Because it was where he was from, and I knew how much he loved it there. And he says, oh, Eileen, I'd really like to live in Morgan. And I said, Leland, I have got to live in some place that's got more than one grocery store. I didn't tell him the real reason. I didn't want to live by his mother. So anyway, we just looked around and felt comfortable with Cache Valley. And so that's where we lived for, well, I hate to say it, we lived there for 20 years. And I can't believe that it was that long. Built a new house and lived there, and it was wonderful being around family, just wonderful. And then my husband died, and then I started having falls, and then I ended up here because my son said, after I'd had 3 falls in 2 weeks, my son said, Mom, it's time. And I said, okay, it's time. My husband and I had talked about this long before he died, that the day would come that one of us would be alone again. I mean, that's just a fact of life. And we would probably end up in an assisted living or some type of facility like this. And so I was prepared for it, and but yet you never want it to come as soon as it does. But it came, and I'm comfortable here. My son, who lives five minutes away, they're so good to me. Everybody here, I've just made friends here, and it's wonderful. I'm glad to be here, in a way. I mean, people would say, oh, don't you just love it there? And I said, no. It was soon after. I've only been here for 9 months. And people would say to me, oh, don't you just love it here? And I said, no, I like it here, but I don't love it here because it's still, I mean, everything here is mine, but it's just that transition again. And when you get older, transitions are hard. But I've done it, and I'm here, And the sun is shining outside. What more could you ask for? And I just had lunch, which was passable, but at least I've got food in me. So it's good. Life's good.
So going back to the very beginning, what were your parents like?
My parents, okay, uh, Daddy was born in Sweden. He was born in 1895, and his family came to the United States in 1901. So he was just 6 years old when they came. And I still can't believe this happened. They had 6 sons and 3 daughters, and the 3 daughters and the oldest son came here to the United States first, and here they didn't speak a word of English. I can't imagine being in, they came into Boston rather than New York, and I can't imagine being in Boston and not speaking a word of English. And yet they did, and so then they came to Utah because they were members of the church. My grandpa lost his job. He was an overseer on a big farm in Sweden. And as soon as he joined the church, he lost his job because in Sweden it's a national religion is Lutheran. And so then they had to leave. So they came here, and I don't know how he and Mother met at a dance someplace, but anyway, they ended up in Tremonton. The 6 brothers, all of them, I can't believe that still. But they all lived close to each other, had their own farms. Mother grew up in Antimony, Utah. I mean, I've been there and it's tiny, just tiny. It is literally the end of the road. But that's where she grew up. But her father was one of these that there's always a better place. So they were always on the move. And that was back in the days of horse and wagons. So it was a big move for them. And so she ended up, Daddy only had an 8th grade education, and Mother only had a high school education. And yet my dad could do math like you couldn't believe. If I had a math question, I went to Daddy. Whereas Mother was the English thing. Daddy made the commitment to himself that he would never have a Swedish accent, because he didn't want to be known as a big dumb Swede. And he didn't have an accent at all. His younger brother, who was born here in the United States, did, but Daddy didn't. And the only time I ever heard my dad speak Swedish was when he was talking on the phone to his mother, and then he'd speak Swedish. But anyway, they got married on the 6th of January sometime, 19-something or other, and settled in Utah. My dad farmed. My mother, of course, was a stay-at-home mom because that's what you did, especially when you keep having babies all the time. And they didn't have a lot, but we never knew that. We just had a good life, and grew up in the 50s. Best time in the whole history of growing up was in the 50s, because we could be gone all day, and your parents never worried about you, because they knew that you were off someplace doing whatever. They knew that you'd come home when you were hungry. But anyway, no, Mother and Daddy. Now, Tremonton was okay, but I didn't want to ever live there again. You know, it was one of those things. But education was very, very important to them. They made sure that their kids had the opportunity of going to college if they wanted to. And my oldest brother, who's 15 years older than I am, he and I were having a race to see which one of us graduated first. And I'll be darned, he beat me by 1 week. But he got his over, well, at that time it was over the mail, correspondence courses from MIT. So he had a better education than I had, I'm sure. But yeah, so we had that race. But it was good. Mother and Daddy were hard parents. They made us toe the line. And I guess that's the reason that in our marriage, my marriage, guess who was the disciplinarian? Me. It wasn't my husband. And my oldest son's first constructed sentence was, "I like Dad better than you." And he meant it, and that's okay, because that's the way he should have been. His daddy coming home at 5 o'clock he was in ecstasy when his dad walked in the door. So, yeah. But anyway, that was Tremonton time. My parents, like I say, saw that I had to have eye surgery when I was 3, and that's unusual for farm people to see that. And so we did that. I had braces on my teeth. Again, very unusual for something like that, but they did that, and yeah. But I wish that I still had all my brothers and sisters with me, but I don't. There's only 2 of us left, just myself and my older brother, who's 92 right now. But my 3 brothers, one in a car accident. When you hit the back of a gravel truck that's full, you don't come out of it alive. And so he died. And then a few years later, my oldest brother, who was in the Air Force at the time and a pilot, and he was stationed in, I think he was stationed in Italy, and he was flying a flight up in Norway and flew into the mountain. He'd been cleared for landing, but because it was white, you know, he couldn't see what he was doing, and of course all visual then, basically. You know, they had instruments, but nothing like today. And the air traffic controller told him that he was cleared for landing. He wasn't, and flew right in the mountain. And so he died. And then 2 months later, my younger brother was on his mission in Sweden, and he only had a couple of months left, and the mission president decided that he needed to be at home with Mother and Daddy. And I'll be darned, 2.5 months later, he died in a car accident. So my mother and dad lost their oldest and their youngest sons in 2.5 months, which was really, really hard on them, but I saw those 2 people just keep going. No matter what, they just kept going. And we found out that you never ask what more can happen, because a year later my mother died of pancreatic cancer. So death to me is no big deal. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, having family members die like that, and then my 2 sisters have died, it's just, and then I've played the organ forever, and so I played for how many funerals, I don't even know. And so death is no big thing. So me sitting here and talking to you about being one of these old people, because that's what I am now, and seeing people die here, I'm not emotional about it, because that's just part of life. And it doesn't bother me one bit. And if we don't prepare for it, then it does bother us. But I'm ready.
With death and the emotions and the grief that follow, did you have a particularly hard time when your mom or dad passed away?
I didn't. My mother, I had to watch her die, and that's not fun. That is not fun at all. And Daddy was 85, and it was time for him to go. He'd married again, and it was time for him to go, because he was, even though he was married again, he was still lonely. He wanted his family, and here 5 of his 7 children were already gone. And that was hard. That was really hard. But no, it's okay. You feel bad. My oldest brother, wrote something very, very poetic, I guess, in one of his letters before he died. It was after Carl had died. That was my first brother that died. He said, "Cry, yes, but feel sorry, no." And that's really the truth. You do cry, because that's part of it. But I would never have wanted my husband to go through what he would have had to go through if he'd been alive. He would have been in a nursing home, and the man was active as could be. And it would have killed him right there. He probably would have haunted me forever. Eileen, how did you do that to me? So, but no, Mother and Daddy were good, hard-working people who had strong testimonies of the church, who just had strong, strong values, and instilled them in all of their children. Great people.
What's one of your most memorable, stories or experiences that you had with your husband?
Oh boy, that's a tough one, because we had so many of them. I think one of the things that kind of stands out in my mind, just to show you the type of relationship that we had. We always said that we had an independent-dependent relationship, because he was gone so much, because with his work for the Corps of Engineers, he was always on the go with that. And of course, when he was in the Air Force, kind of stable, and then the church took a lot of his time. So he was gone a lot, but and then he taught leadership classes for the Corps of Engineers in the Army all over the United States. But he taught with a woman, and so they were together a lot. And people would say, "Eileen, don't you worry about him?" Never. I have no worries about him whatsoever. Well, okay, I was able to go back to Washington, D.C. with him once. So he was teaching back there. It was actually at Fort Belvoir in Virginia. And I wasn't going to sit in the hotel room all the time. You got to be kidding. So I did all the touring and everything. And every day I got on in a taxi and went into Washington, D.C. and did the touring there. And he'd come back from class and we'd go do stuff together. But we were together, but we weren't together. And it was just, I never thought that I would be able to see Washington, D.C. as much as I did, but it was because of his work. And I appreciated that very much. We had some stupid, funny experiences because we did crazy things. Oh, I've got to tell you one. Okay, we're on our way back from Utah through Idaho. We'd gone to my, not 20-year class reunion, but one of my class reunions, which I never wanted to go to because I was so glad to get out of Bear River High School. I hope nobody in Bear River ever sees this, but anyway, we were on our way back, hotter than heck in southern Idaho. Just so hot. And the car quit. There we are on the interstate, hotter than heck, and the car quits. And the sign on the interstate said, this little town up ahead, well, how are we going to get up there? So we were able to get the car. Oh, some people came by who we knew had been to the temple in Boise because they were dressed up. And so they stopped and gave us a ride into this little town called Hazleton. It's a Saturday. Do you ever have car trouble on a Saturday? You're never going to get it fixed. We go into Hazleton. The one mechanic shop in there was open. And the guy that was working there was, I don't know if you've ever seen not Beverly Hillbillies, but one of the other ones anyway, Cooter. He was the mechanic, and this guy looked just like Cooter, greasy overalls and everything, and he said, we'll go out and get it and bring it back, and so we did, and the timing chain was broken. You don't go any place when it's like that. And so he said, but we were driving a Fiat, which is even worse. A Fiat, Saturday afternoon, the car's dead. You're going to be there forever. So he calls into Twin Falls, and they had a part for it, and the parts store was open. So he went and sent his wife into Twin Falls, which was only about, maybe 15 minutes away, and she brought the part back, and he put it in, and we were on our way. And it's just the craziest thing, just experiences like this, together. But I can remember me standing there at the side of the car cussing like crazy and saying, we pay our tithing, Heavenly Father, how could you let this happen to us? And then, realizing, Eileen, that was the worst thing to say, but I said it anyway. But no, we had a lot of things like that. We worked with the young adults in the church. So many wonderful experiences with young adults. And we look at our son now, who's in a young adult ward bishopric, and what he and his wife do. And I look at them and go, oh my gosh, that wears me out. And then I think, we were doing exactly the same thing at their age. So, yeah, they're doing it when they should be doing it, not when I should be doing it. I'm here where I need to be. So, yeah, lots of experiences with him because he did a lot of traveling. He was on the road a lot, or in the air a lot. We were able to go to Alaska once together because of his brother being up there in the Air Force and him being in the Air Force. So we went up, didn't cost us anything to fly up there. We went on a military plane. Okay, it was a cargo plane. I don't know if you've ever noticed there are certain letters that they use, like my oldest brother flew a C-130. C is for cargo. And then there's F. My husband's brother-in-law was a F-111 pilot in Vietnam. F is for fighter. So anyway, but we went on a cargo plane. The seats are backwards. So you look not at the front of the plane, you look at the cargo in the back of the plane. So instead of being pinned in your seat when you take off, you're this way. And it took us 4 hours to get up to Alaska. And this was from Seattle. And it was just snowing and it was horrible, but that was when you go. You go when it's, the opportunity. Had a wonderful time there. It was the year that they didn't have enough snow in Alaska to open their ski resorts. weird, but it was cold. Oh, it was so cold. But we had a good time with his brother. But see, because of his assignments in things, we were able to do so much that most people don't.
What piece of technology has been created in your lifetime that just blows you away?
The computer. Absolutely a computer. I remember my husband saying when they got computers at the Corps that they came and put it on his desk. By this he was up in the office because he was assistant. He was the civilian assistant to the colonel. And so he was up in the exec offices. Anyway, he says that they came and put it on his desk, and he said, "What am I going to do with this?" And they said, "Well, okay." The tech said, "Okay, what you do with this is in the morning, just turn it on." And so he said, "I turned it on and just let it hum at me." He said, "I had a secretary. What did I need a computer for?" But see, that's the difference, because now you talk to the computer and you tell it what, so this sort of thing. So it's the computer. I mean, I had electric lights. My mother said that the best thing that ever happened in their life was when I was born, because I was the first one that she'd had when they had indoor plumbing. See? And I tell kids that now, they go, "You got indoor plumbing? That's always been." No, it hasn't.
That is crazy.
So it's a computer, and of everything that's gone with it. Because there's so many things that now, I mean, I got a computer sitting over there that I could work on it, but darned if I'm going to do it. I know how to do stuff on it. I did that in New Zealand as a secretary. I had to use a computer. I'd never even turned one on. And so our assistant director was a genius at it. And so I'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm going, "Pity, get up here. I don't know what I'm doing." So up he'd come, so I learned on that was probably it right there's the computer, all the electronic stuff.
What piece of advice would you give to the people listening? Something either you've learned in your lifetime or something you wish you would have learned earlier?
I wish I would have learned earlier that you can be happy even when it's a bad experience. That being happy is up to you. It's not up to anybody else. It's not up to your surroundings or anything. It's up to you. And that's one of the things that I have really learned. Because you'll say, "Oh, well, that person doesn't make me happy." Well, of course not, because it's not their job to do it. It's your job to be happy. And when I was we went to a class reunion again that I didn't want to go to, but my husband was always pushing, because he went to a class. His class had 37 graduates in it. It was in Morgan, because at that time, in 1959, it was still a farming community completely. But so we always went, and we get there, and I go, "Oh, nothing's changed, has it?" And it's just the same. But anyway, I get up. They want you to get up and say what you've been doing for the last 20 years in 5 minutes. So this is showing you how I've changed. So I got up and did my thing. And Ward Taylor, who was the president of our class at that time, got up and he said, "Do you people realize that we just heard Eileen say more in 5 minutes than we heard her say in 12 years of school?" So I've changed. It's good. Because you don't make friends if you're a wallflower or sit in the corner all the time. So just have fun. And I'm not saying that every day's fun, because it's not. There are days that I've cursed being alive, but you get through them if you've got the right attitude.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Eileen.
You're welcome.
With that, I'm Landon, and this is Old Times Talk. Thanks for tuning in to Old Times Talk. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss when wisdom drops. If you or someone you know would like to be interviewed on this podcast, head to oldtimestalk.com and click on the referral tab. And remember, keep the old stories alive. But with that, I'm Landon, and this is Old Times Talk.